Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining early and on time. We're just going to give people about 2 minutes to finish joining, and then we'll get everything kicked off. Unfortunately, we cannot interact with you, so just bear with us for a few minutes. All right, still see some people joining. Thank you, guys. We're just going to give it another minute or so before we kick it off, give people an opportunity to join. Thanks, Jenna. Still have some people coming in here. Tyler, I like how is your icon a hat? Is that what I see over here?
It is very specifically chosen. It's a fedora.
I like it.
Perfect. White with a little bit of black, if you want to read into that.
Actually, when I first saw it, I thought it was a cheeseburger, a black and white cheeseburger. Probably because I'm a little hungry right now.
Yeah.
All right. Give everyone another minute. I see people are still coming in. Thank you, guys. Thank you to those who joined early. We appreciate it. All right. I think we're at a good spot to kick it off. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kristen Koenig. I'm a consultant over here at Harbor Networks. I just want to take a minute to note a few things before we get started. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, we're unable to interact with everyone, so your mics and cameras are turned off. But if you look at the top of your screen, you'll see a smiley face. If everyone could click on that and just send an emoticon along so we know that you're with us, you're able to interact with us. Awesome, awesome. I know there's more people out there. Keep them coming. There we go. Great. Awesome. And feel free to send those along throughout the presentation, letting us know you're with us. And along with next to that, next to the smiley face, you'll see a box with a question mark in it. This is how you'll be submitting questions to us, and we'll go ahead and try to get them answered best we can throughout the presentation. If for some reason we're unable to get to them, we'll follow up at the end individually. And also at the end of the webinar, a 4-question survey will pop up on your screen automatically. You don't have to do anything. We'd appreciate your feedback with regards to this webinar and future ones. And along with our other cybersecurity webinars that we do monthly, they are recorded along with this one, and you'll find them on our website, harbornetworks.com, under the resources tab. So feel free to take a look over there. Lastly, and almost most exciting, we'll be doing a giveaway at the end. We're going to be giving away 2 dark web scans and 2 ransomware assessments. So hang on until the end, and we'll raffle those off and let everybody know who's won them. Now that logistics are out of the way, I'd like to introduce Rolin Peets, who you will also hear referred to as Bud throughout this presentation. He's an information security officer. We have Tyler Wrightson, who's a cybersecurity consultant, and John Flory, who's the CISO over here at Harbor Networks. I'll kick it over to you, John.
Thanks, Kristen. Awesome job putting this together. So thanks a lot for joining us for this webinar. I'm really excited about ITS78. It's something that, in my mind, is overdue, and it's going to be great value to you. So I'm going to go through the agenda really quick. We're going to talk about, what do we need to know? We already introduced ourselves. We're going to talk about our approach to ITS78, what's available, how we do things. I'm going to talk about the current state of cybersecurity. What are we seeing? What's going on? I have the pleasure of being an incident responder. So I'm involved a lot of times when people have incidents, right, or breaches, and I'm there around the table with them. So it's given me a lot of insight as to, hey, how are these attackers doing what they're doing? What is the best way to combat it? How do we make ourselves defensible and in a good position? How do we show and document progress? And Tyler and Bud are absolute rock stars. So I'm excited to have them in here because they're going to talk about specifically our approach and how we do different things. Now, Kristen, for some reason, I'm not able to change the slide. So I don't know why, but I'm going to have you. Oh, there you go. It just popped up. Yeah, good, Kristen. That was great. Okay. All right. So we participated in all 4 categories of ITS78. We felt like all these categories are really important to the towns, cities, municipalities, nonprofits, schools, right? So we are participating in all 4 of these. So they're available in our slate, and we're going to go through each one. I'll touch on them here. Category 1. It's a full range of the audits, the compliance, the assessments, really helps getting us a baseline, right? Find out where are we? How do we measure up? Because why that's really important, not necessarily where we are, but it's going to give us a map to where we're going to be. And it's going to allow us to document wins. And you're going to hear me talk about that throughout this presentation and our methodology and how we do that. Category 2. Oh man, near and dear to my heart. Third-party assessments, third-party due diligence. We're only as strong as our weakest third party, right? As our weakest cloud provider. So it's so important that we're able to wrangle these third parties and have some order to it. And make it so at times they can help our defensive posture. At times they can actually be an extra layer. So how to not only make sure that they're not going to hurt us, but is there any way that they can help us? Because we've seen that there is. So talk about those things in our program. Third is the most fun part of it. And it's really the cybersecurity testing and readiness. How do we help you? How do we act as bad actors? And Tyler's going to really highlight this, but what are these bad actors doing? And then how do we simulate that in our business to understand how are we going to be able to stop it? How are our current defenses stacking up, right? And really, these are all steps to make ourselves better. And the 4th is the incident response. I talked about incident response and how I spend much of my time helping people that are going through incidents. And, the attacks have changed. In the last 20 to 24 months, I've seen a distinct change in the battlefield when people are combating these hackers. And I'll frame it up for you. So old attack, phishing, which is still absolutely the primary today. It was phishing then, and it's phishing now. It might have dropped a couple points, and we're going to talk about a few other ways that they're exploiting. But it was phishing, and they would encrypt you and ask for a ransom. And if you had a decent hygiene, good backups that were tested, etc., you may be able to recover. It would still cause some pain, but nothing like what's happening now. New attack. These criminals methodically take data over time. So they take your data, and then once they have all your data, then they encrypt you. So now when I'm sitting around the table and we're going through the talks and we're trying to understand what we're dealing with, it's absolutely about productivity and being able to provide services, etc., especially where many of you sit. But now the extortion is in play. And what they do is they say, okay, this is what we have. We have these, they have it all. They'll highlight some things that they think is very valuable to you. And they'll say, this is what we have. And they'll show you that they have it. And they'll say, so next Thursday, we're going to go to the media outlets and expose this. So we don't want to be in that position, right? And if we are in that position, we want to be as defensible as we can be. So our programs are about, hey, let's be aware of what's going on out there. Let's be aware of what's going on in our environments. Let's find our risk and document it, mitigate, right, or remediate that risk and document it, and then repeat. It's a journey. Okay. You don't get there, but you can have a much better ride when you do things properly. So what we do is we find risk, we document it, we fix it, we document it, and we move on. And that's a process that keeps going. Old school cybersecurity, we point a bunch of things out to you. Sorry, Tyler, because Tyler is that component. We round out the component at Harvard. That's what we make sure that we have the best in the world at making sure to find out what is going on and what is wrong. But then we say, we're going to help you fix it. And we're going to be an extension of your team. And we're going to work with your team to help fix it. And that's the power in the program is it's modular. It's flexible. Yeah, we offer a lot and it's very comprehensive, but you may have to start here. So let's talk about that. We don't have to, this is not a rigid widget that has to be put into everything that we do. It's not, it's really flexible. This is about helping you, documentation, defensibility. And what we do is we procure and manage these contracts. Okay. So let's move on. I'm going to turn it over to Bud, and he's going to talk a little bit about the best practices, doing some gap analysis, the scorecarding. We talked about if there is anything that you have to comply with, how to validate our controls. The biggest mistake in security programs that I see is people buy tools and then they build their security program around the tools. And the problem with that, there's some great tools out there, but tools get beat. I told you I'm an incident response. You can't name a firewall, just being straight with you. You can't name IDS. You can't name a tool that hasn't got beat, that I haven't sit around the table for, because these criminals have figured out whether it's a patch or whatever, that they've been able to get around the tools. So tools get beat. It's a radar detector. So we have to layer our tools and then we have to watch our tools, right? And we're going to help you do that and talk about it. And tabletop exercises are great because what a tabletop exercise does is it helps with culture. You know, I used to always say people, process, technology in that order when it comes to cybersecurity. Now I say it's CPPT. And CPPT is not a new California regulation or anything like that. It's culture, people, process, technology. So many organizations think, oh, IT's got the firewall. Well, we're good. We're all set. And that's not what it's all about. So we do an incident response tabletop exercise with the stakeholders in the organization. And we go through some different incidents. And it really makes them understand, hey, we have a stake in this also, and so does my team. It's more than IT. Old strategy is not working. People are getting hacked. People are spending more money than ever on IT, and they're going to hack more than ever. Okay, not working. Very, very bad. And the biggest part of that, in my eyes, people say, oh, people are allowed to pay ransom and lots of. The biggest part of that is that we're putting it all on IT. When we evaluate organizations, less than 30% of risk is in IT. So we need to have culturally people to understand what their roles, responsibilities are, what their dangers are, what their help is. And then we have to have a way to measure that and document it. Okay, so Bud, I've been going off. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, John. John, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sound great.
All right, great. So a couple things that come to mind. First off, I'm Rolin Peets. I'm duly certified in data privacy and information security. I've been a data protection officer for a large media company and also their chief information security officer. And, as time has evolved, cybersecurity was super hot, right? And everyone needed it. Everyone still needs it. But what's happening now, there's a morphing of data privacy is becoming equally important, right? I take a different approach. Harbor takes a different approach a little bit. We're not just about cybersecurity. We also assess from a data privacy perspective. It's all about the data, right? It's always been that way. So we take a different approach, and John was talking about culture, and that's absolutely right. Also in play here is, and John mentioned it, it's not just about a firewall, right? It's about defense in depth. So that means a number of things. So it's, do you have the proper technology in place? Is it properly configured? And does it align with your policy? So um, just a little bit about policy, and you'll see me reference policy and controls. Policy is really at a high level what it is that you want to do as an organization. So setting expectations relative to cybersecurity, data privacy, or maybe you have an acceptable use policy, is setting expectations of what you want to do. And you'll see me say controls, or you'll see it on the presentation. Controls is how you actually align and subscribe and comply with the policy. So just to give a little bit of background of what I think is important as far as terms go. So then all that means is defense in depth and making yourself defensible in the court of law, right? So documenting your program through policy and controls, having governance in play. Those are all very important. So I'll start at the top here and just not read it line for line, obviously, but give you a little bit of background of what it is that we work with. I believe firmly, and especially with our audience here today, the NIST, so National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a part of the federal government, has implemented and defined a number of security catalogs and policies and controls that you all can take advantage of if you haven't done so already. So one being the cybersecurity framework. And the cybersecurity framework is for critical infrastructure. It's a national framework, but it's internationally recognized as being very effective, and really aligns nicely with all the critical functions and services that you provide to your customers and consumers. All right, so that's a great framework and alignment that everyone on this phone, if you haven't done so already, it's something we can help with and something you should be considering. And it's based on security controls that are defined in 853. It's just a whole bunch of numbers here, but it's security policy and controls to help you set your security strategy and therefore secure your environment, right? So that's something we can help with. We also work from a HIPAA perspective. It's a nice. I've also been a HIPAA security and privacy officer, so I have vast experience in that area. But HIPAA, if it's something that's in play, also aligns with the cybersecurity framework very nicely. The NIST also developed a privacy framework, which is very cool because it's a sister of the security framework, and they share a number of policies so that you're not reinventing the wheel, right? So those two together are awesome from a just overall data risk management perspective, those two components. And then, of course, 201 CMR 17, which is the state of Massachusetts legislation, which has been enacted for quite some time now. And before California, Nevada, Virginia, and Colorado implemented their privacy laws, that was the crown jewel. But from a Massachusetts perspective, it's still in play. It's still very effective, and NIST aligns with it nicely, right? So those are some of the alignments that we focus on from a security standards perspective. Also, services that we provide, which are a part of Category 1, audit and compliance assessments, whether it be your traditional IT control environment, we can assess that, but also your operational technology, industrial control systems, and otherwise, if you're delivering power, gas, water. There's a lot of similarities in the way you assess those environments. So, just a couple examples. Over on the right, I have a diagram around, you need to know what you have in order to assess it and protect it, right? So inventory your assets, prioritize and categorize those assets, identify the risk and the potential impacts of those type of assets have, and then identify and implement your policy and controls, again, defense in depth, right? across those environments and assets that you deem critical. And then what would a security program be without monitoring, right? So monitoring the program overall, which can help you provide measurement and baselines for ongoing program maturity and maturation. But those things together really form an ongoing life cycle, because that's really what security or privacy is. It's a life cycle. It's not a project, although there could be an initial project to put these things in play. It's about the people, the process, technology, and culture, and bringing that forward and really maturing it as time goes on. It's not something that can happen overnight, but we certainly can help you get there by identifying your most critical risk matched up against your most precious asset. And assets are technology, people, and data, right? So that's how I like to think about my risk assessments. And then to wrap it all up relative to these services, developing a program that fits your needs. So a strategy, overall governance. For example, an IT director should not be solely responsible for risk that your organization is facing, right? So governance means, creating that committee that can sanction your policy and your controls and help make risk-based decisions as time goes on, right? Harbor can also help you with security orchestration. So once John said it's not technology alone, right? It's a number of things that come together, but security orchestration through automation, the days of, an IT person looking at a log and looking for anomalies, that's well beyond us now. We need artificial intelligence and security orchestration to detect anomalies, to respond to the anomalies, to begin remediation or mitigation. And some event or incident may lead you to go back to the policy and say, we need to change a policy or tighten a control because it wasn't working because we had this event or incident. So that's where the measurements and the best practices and baselines come together. But those things together, defense in depth, make up your security or privacy program. I think it's really important as time goes on that you have a unified approach, because I assume everyone on this call is collecting personally identifiable information. And that's what 201 CMR 17 was focused on, right? It's protecting PII. But it's no longer just cybersecurity. You need to, have a unified strategy relative to data management, which includes security and privacy. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of flavor of what we do without getting too super deep. And I'll turn it back over to John.
Yeah, really good. But I just had a couple things that stuck out to me. Yeah, for the standards NIST, awesome way to go. If you were looking for ISO or SOC, we also do help you there. We core around NIST though, and generally when you look at the frameworks and you pull them apart, they're very, very similar. And then there's nuances, so we can help you through any of that. So that's really cool. And the assessment is great because remember when I was talking about let's get wins and document them, because that's the best thing to do. If anything ever happens or anybody knocks on your door or whatever else, having these type of processes are huge. So the assessment's going to give us that opportunity to get the wins because it gives us our baseline and then we plan together. Let's get wins. Let's go along the way. And it's great, even when it comes to technology, road mapping and planning, etc. Really. So really good. Monitoring what you said struck me. I talked about how I'm an incident responder and I show up. And so what these criminals do is they go in at 2:00 in the morning when you're sleeping, right? And they take a little bit and they leave. So we have to have some help watching that, right? Because they're smart enough to know, there's already been a posting this weekend, it's going to be rough. The FBI posted, we're going to have a rough weekend because these hackers know we're all going to go have fun or try to have fun or be with our families or, do something. And that's when they attack. So monitoring is really important. And part of that is having all of our logs in one place. And we can talk to you and help you with all this. If we could correlate those logs in one place and watch them for you or help you watch them or be an extension of your team to do that, it's really big because when an incident happens, if you don't have that, you're trying to find out, going to the servers, going to the firewalls, going to the switches, where did it happen? If everything's in one place, Because speed's huge, right? We can operate faster and more effectively. And same thing with security orchestration. That just gives us more speed, because speed is everything. Time will get us. So we need to find these things and be able to be on, I call it actionable visibility. Not only being able to see it and point it out to you, but being able to say, hey, I'll stop it for you. You can stay sleeping if you want. We'll work that out in our security orchestration together, but that's the way we'll work it. And the last thing is on the governance. Let's find out, where is our risk? Yeah, we have a firewall. Yeah, we have endpoint protection. Where's our risk? Okay, it's a good thing to know in the organization. So category 2, we're going to talk about this. You're only, Tyler is somebody that helps break in to show you where you're weak so you can make yourself stronger. This is Bud's section, but, and I have quite a history of doing that. And we used to always target third parties because it was quick and easy to get after a third party, whether it's your cloud vendor, which Tyler will talk more about the network type attacks. I'm going to talk more even the physical attacks. We've been asked to break into everywhere. I mean, places that hold critical infrastructure and power plants, etc. And the last power facility we got into was very locked down. It was really locked down, and they did a really good job. And we're like, how the heck are we going to get these guys? So what we did is we just staked them out and found out who the janitorial company was and when they came. And then we knocked off badges. And the janitorial company came at 6 o'clock at night, right? And then they started working. So we knocked off badges, supervisor, and we didn't go at 6 o'clock at night. We went at 12 o'clock at noontime. We said, hey, we're an inspector with a janitorial company, and we have to make sure our people are following protocol and abiding by our contract, and got let right in, right? So it's really, third party can be dangerous in a lot of different ways. That's an indirect way a third party can bite you. And Bud, talk about the assessments, because to me, this is huge. Who the heck's touching our data? Who are they? What data are they touching? And I was at a risk assessment the other day, and we were sitting around the table, and they were like, who has the janitor's key? The janitorial company was the key, and they're all looking at each other. Do you know? So these are very important things. Go for it, Bud.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. It's about visibility, and Tyler's going to talk about what he will provide to you from a visibility perspective. And we complement each other relative to a risk assessment you could do to identify your gaps so you can move forward to remediate and further mature your program, right? So it's all about visibility. John mentioned it prior to that, so it's super important. And it doesn't end with your local environment. So back 20 years ago or longer, back in, I think it was 94 when I had my first incident, and it was user-based, right? So some things never changed. John talked about ransomware. I had, back then, it was more of a delivery of a payload through an email message into my email server that brought the server down, right? So things were very immature. We didn't have the tools and capabilities back then. So, it's all about visibility and managing those risks. And now we morph from 20 years ago, where we didn't have third-party risk necessarily. Your third-party risk was, do they have a key to the loading dock when they come and deliver something? Or third parties that deliver technology did so in your private data center or put it on your servers in your server room. There was none of this, for the most part. It wasn't mainstream cloud-based computing, which we have now. Which is really introducing a whole new set of complexities and risk that need to be considered on an ongoing perspective so you can manage those risks. So again, it's about visibility. And some of the services, and I won't go too deep into this, and I'm not going to get deep into the reading of this, but what we do is, I think it's important to same thing with internally. If you don't know what your asset is, you can't manage it. If you don't have an idea of who your third parties are, you can't manage them, right? And to be clear on some of this stuff, and what's most important to me is taking your vendors and identifying and classifying them. What do they support? Do they support in process PII, personally identifiable information of your customers, your consumers? If they do, it's a tier 1. Do they deliver critical functional services to your organization? I'll just use Microsoft Office 365 or Google Mail for an example. If they deliver those services, they're a tier 1. So those when I think tier 1, those are the ones that are managing your most valuable data or delivering your most critical service to support your business functions. Maybe it's a billing, or maybe it's a credit card processor, whatever it is. They're third parties, and understanding what they do and how they're doing it is really important. So third-party supply chain policy review and development, and it's, for example, NIST 853, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They just released a new version, and there's 2 new areas of concern that they've implemented in their controls. It's supply chain or third-party management, and it's data privacy. So that tells you where the world's going, right? So everyone here probably has a hybrid environment. It's important to understand and manage those risks from third parties. So again, what data do they process? And understanding their associated risks. So what I like to do is always go in and look at contracts, or I go to their websites and see if you don't have a contract, or maybe a shrink wrap contract, at least understand what the risks are associated with them. If you have a third party that you're have contracted with and are managing or processing your data, and I have a customer right now where their third party, who is a processor of data, hasn't updated their privacy policy in 3 years. Well, the world has changed immensely, so that's a significant risk. So I like to go and understand either contracts or get a view of what the company or your third party is doing from a public perspective. Really important. I also like to do live in-person assessments and sessions with third parties. This is part of our third-party outsourcing management process, where I sit down with your tier 1 vendors, or all of your vendors, if that makes sense, and follow the data. Where is the data collect? What is the entry point? How is it processed? How is it stored? And then, ultimately, what happens when you leave that third party? What do they do with the data when you're done? Did they give it back to you? Do they then delete it? All of that should be within a contract, right? So that you're not going to be left holding the bag if something bad happens. So, but that's super important. And I mentioned before, NIST and their policy controls that they've implemented support all these activities that I'm mentioning here. Developing an onboarding and offboarding workflow, super important. I've come from a really large organization, 15,000 employees. And you can imagine that if someone in marketing, for example, wanted a vendor because they do a super great job in delivering content and media content to potential customers, they'd go out and sign. They would execute a contract, and there it was done. And at that point, you don't have a lot of recourse if something bad were to happen. So what I did is, I funneled all third parties through a common process and workflow for onboarding. We'd assess the risk up front from a security and privacy perspective, and is the contractual language going to work for your environment and meet your business objectives, so that if something were to go sideways, you have contract language to protect you that's been executed. So that's all super important. On top of this, security and privacy questionnaires and development, managing third parties. If you don't collect data and understand the risk, it's really hard to gauge whether or not you're going to be effective and be able to protect your data. The questionnaires around that are super important, right? I like to inventory your vendors. Along with that, what master services agreement or license agreement do you have in place in alignment with the vendor that you've brought on board, who's now managing your data or providing a function for you? And then if you don't have it, I highly recommend it. We work with a number of really good law firms. Before we bring a third party in, either internal counsel or external should be reviewing contract language, right? So it's super important right now to understand, the capabilities of your vendor, where the risks are, and if the risk is too great. I've been a couple of times recently where if we backed out of deals and the business agreed, like we when it came to renewal, for example, and it was kind of easy at that point, we declined to renew because that vendor had some flaws that we didn't know of because the business went out and executed an agreement, right? So just that ongoing management of your relationships with those vendors from the very beginning to the very end is important, especially since even if there's a misconception if you offload and go to the cloud that you're transferring risk and you may absolve yourself from those risks. That's not true. And I'm no lawyer, but if you look at responsibilities and obligations from a legal perspective, if you're collecting data through a third party, you're still the data controller, and you have responsibility to make sure that your processor is performing security or privacy, has those programs in place to protect the data. And if they have a breach, it's not their breach, it's your breach, for example. So managing third-party risk is evolving. And as I said, hybrid environments have really raised the bar on what it is that we all need to do to manage third parties. So that's all I had. I'm going to turn it back over to John, and we'll go to probably Tyler right after that.
Yeah, really good. Really good. What you said really hit home. It's dangerous, right? So let's document it. Let's have our house in order, right? We can't control everything. We could control. And so that's what this will help you do, right? And when you talk about privacy, you mentioned a few times, privacy simply means, to me, these consumers, these individuals now have rights. So it's dangerous, right? So you had to make sure that we're pretty buttoned up there, because who knows where that could lead. All right, here's the fun part. Tyler, talk about what you do, man. And we can see, so we can do all this penetration testing, the assessment, social engineering, vulnerable. And nowadays, when we hack people, we go after their people a lot of times, right? If their system is good, we'll go after their people, and it's pretty easy. And Tyler's going to go through it. So go for it, Tyler.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I will say though, Tyler, before you start, I thought my whole spiel was pretty fun too.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Right. All right, so I'll start with why everyone on the call should care what I have to say. And the reason is super simple. It is because the problem with hackers is extremely unique, right? It is very different from all of the other areas of risk. So things like business impact and business continuity and disaster recovery and privacy, those are unique challenges. Hacking and cyber criminals is entirely its own ball of wax. And that is because there are actual criminals who are looking specifically to circumvent whatever security controls you put in place to cash out. And cashing out for them could be disrupting your business, holding your data ransom, extortion. That's why it's so unique. And so for me, one of the best ways to understand part of the problem and how to address the problem is through these service analogies, right? And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my background. So I lead our red team here at Harbor. I've been in hacking and offensive security for 21 years now. I've written 2 books on the subject, one on securing wireless networks and the other on hacking and offensive security, essentially how to hack into any organization. And so for me, understanding what we do and what hackers do, it's very, very similar to any martial arts, okay, where you have an actual adversary who's essentially trying to hurt you, right? And so you need to come up with adequate defenses and responses to combat that. And so understanding our 4 core services in my domain, they fall neatly under these analogies, right? So the first one is what we call a comprehensive security assessment. And that's where, right, if you're looking to get into boxing and prepare for a street fight, right, the best place to start is with an analysis of where your strengths and your weaknesses are. And that's what a comprehensive security assessment is. It's an analysis, right? We're not fighting you yet. We're just saying, okay, what is your body mass? What is your weight? What is your reach? All of these things that can help understand where your strengths and where your weaknesses lie, right? So that's the first type of assessment we can do, an assessment to understand your strengths and weaknesses. Next up is a penetration test. And this is a good analogy is sparring, all right? So it's a basic type of fight where we're simulating an adversary, we're simulating your opponent, but we're working with you, right? We're not actively trying to fight you. We're just testing and going through certain things and saying, okay, how would you respond to this? Okay, good, you blocked that. Now, how would you deal with this move and that type of thing, right? That's a penetration test. We're simulating an opponent. Next up is a real slug match, right? So that's where we are fully simulating a real fight. We're during the entire fight, we are truly simulating an attacker, and we want you to respond fully and adequately as if this were a real fight. So whereas in a pen test, we're working with you and there's a lot more collaboration, here we save that to the end. And we're saying, hey, look, we're going to fight you. And we want you to respond as if this were a real fight. And that's a red team test. And so if we have time, I know John might want to go into some of the real world examples of when we've done pen testing or red teaming, and we can really provide some clarification here. But last, but definitely not least, is what we call purple team testing. And these are really individual things that will work with you to say, okay, let's improve your jabs, right? Let's just work on a jab with you. And again, that could be, hey, let's work on your ability to detect password brute forcing attacks. And that's all we're going to focus on together. So we're going to sit in a room together, sit at the same table, and go over how the attack actually works, right? What your opponent's trying to accomplish, what their move's going to look like, and how you can pick up on that and actually respond. So again, purple team testing is very much, where we're looking to simulate very specific things and make sure you can pick up on those. And just so you understand where the term comes from, so in our field, right, red team testing is us, the offensive players, simulating attackers, and they typically call the defenders blue teamers, right? So you take red and blue together, and that creates purple, and that's where we get purple team testing from. So that's really it. That's all of our core services in my domain, and how you can utilize those to create an overall comprehensive program to deal with hackers and all the unique challenges that come with hackers.
I love that whole program, Tyler, because you start out and Bud's assessment is foundational, right? When we're talking NIST or ISO or SOC, that's foundational, which is policy out, which is really good. With this assessment is more of we're going to go through every one of your controls, every one of your tools, and we're going to see how they respond, and we're going to see where the weakness is. And then we're going to knock on the door a little bit, right, and see if we can get in. And then if you feel comfortable, we're going to try to see what we can do. And if we find something, we're not going to keep going. We're going to stop. We're going to, that type of thing. So understand that. But the purple teaming is awesome because it's a chance to really collaborate and sit down together and say, okay, let's brute force a bunch of passwords and see what happens. See how what you have going is working, and where do we need to tweak it and get that win, right? And document the win. So it's really huge. Tyler, just give us an example of how you've been able to get into somebody's environment.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you a super simple red team example, right? Where in a red team, we are not telling the defensive players that the attack is coming, right? So we're not collaborating with them. We're trying to see how they will actually fare in a real world incident. And I always like to use this example because it's easy for everyone to grasp because it's just related to physical security, right? So everyone understands physical security at its most basic levels. So we were trying to break into a power plant and deliver a simulated bomb. So ultimately, what we did was for round one, we just simply dressed up as FedEx. Got a FedEx logo and stuck it on a rented white van. Showed up with our pallet, and basically drove right in. And we literally were able to unload this pallet, with a few hundred pounds of concrete on it to simulate a bomb, and we delivered that right into the building. So again, that's a really easy one where you may have controls in place and you say, well, look, we have our guard gate and we check every visitor and yada yada, but we want to say, okay, with those controls in place, what might an actual hacker do and how would you fare against those things? Yeah. And so another quick example, right, is where we use phishing, because that is the number one most common tactic used by hackers today, right? So essentially we sent an email to thousands of people at this organization, knowing that all we needed was at that point a 0.001 success rate. We needed one person to respond to this email and click our link and try to log in. But basically what it says was, hey, congratulations, this organization has started using Dropbox, make it easier for you to save and share files. So go ahead and log into your account using your network credentials. So we got a whole bunch of people, I think, literally within, minutes of sending the email, we got a whole bunch of credentials, people trying to log into the system. So at that point, we were able to log into their email, their VPN. This was one of our best examples where within 4 hours of clicking send on the email, we had domain admin access to their network, meaning we had godlike access to everything. So if we were bad actors, we could have stolen every piece of data at this organization, deployed ransomware, and locked up everything that they cared about, and be on the phone extorting them for millions of dollars.
Right. So it's really important to go through these events. Incident response. I'm trying to think of the last 2 or 3 I've had. One of them was very simple, mailbox takeover. Right. They didn't have multi-factor. Multi-factor is really important to have that extra layer of protection because people are password fatigued. They're passworded out. They have so many passwords, and they've had so many passwords that what they do is they use their work password because they can remember it at the time. So when they create an account or when they download the free app, right? Nothing's free. When you read the fine terms of these apps, how they're making money a lot of times is selling your data. So people will use their work. You can change their passwords, etc., but they use them. And then that is literally sold out the back door that day or that minute or that hour, whatever. And then people, if you don't have multi-factor, can literally get right into your system in your mailbox. And that's what I had. It was basically the accountant, the person that was in charge, and they watched the activity. They did what we call a mailbox takeover, which is they just got the password and went in and did freely. That's why monitoring and watching it can be very important too. Hey, 2 people are in there at once and all this other type of thing. So we'll have time where we're going to go over a bunch of tactics. We had one last year, so it's on our website. I think it was focused mostly on social engineering though. Oh, and there was also one on offensive hacking. So we've got a couple webinars on our website of specific examples, like an hour's worth of all the different ways that we've gotten in and then how we've been able to help people. This is near and dear to my heart, incident response plan, right? And incident response services. First of all, if you have an incident, call us. We're there. So we have made a commitment that if someone needs our help from an incident response perspective, from a forensics perspective, from helping you get healthy quickly, hands-on keyboard perspective, we do that. That's our business. That's what I live for. I have a lot of late nights, a lot of early mornings, and I love it. So we have an incident response team. So if you are experiencing an incident, you can call us. It's procurable. It's on ITS78, and then we're going to find out what happened, who it happened to, how it happened, how do we stop it from happening, and very, very importantly, are they out of here? We'll give you attestation. They're gone, right? And then we start to make a plan, because what happens is people rebuild. They panic. I'm having an incident. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't, a lot of things go through their heads, and they start to rebuild. And what that does is it makes it so we can't find out what happened, right? And we can't really pinpoint it as well. And these crooks know you're going to rebuild quickly, and they put these little, nuggets all over the place. So even though you rebuilt and you might think you're up, they're not gone. So incident response is really important, and it's important that it's done correctly, forensics, etc. It's like the good thing about all of this is digital forensics are the most, there's no hearsay in digital forensic. It is what it is, and if you try to cover it up, it leaves more of a path. We can get there and we can find it, but it's got to be done properly. Think about, we just were able to work with the FBI and then the Secret Service to get cyber criminals extradited that went after somebody in the Boston market. We turned it on them and went after them. And now it's going to court. And think about it. Think about like any trial, right? If something's not done right, or the police mishandle it, or it's all crazy. If this stuff has to be done properly, we have invested in the resources to do that. So if you have an incident, please call us, because we're going to give you the attestation you need, and we're going to be an extension of your team to make sure that they're out of here, and maybe we'll go after them, right? And we have the tools to be able to do that. My goal was to give you 10 minutes back for lunch, but I'm not going to give you quite 10 minutes, because we're going to bring on Kristen, who is going to go over a couple giveaways. These are great. The dark web scan is really good, because this is just simply going to tell you, are the credentials in my domain out there in clear text, and where are they, and how long have they been out there, and who's are out there, and so I can have them change their password. So that's a really good one to have done for you. And the ransomware assessment's phenomenal also, because ransomware is the biggest risk right now. The biggest risk right now, I mean, unless you're, we talk about control systems, right? Unless you're in charge of electricity or et cetera. But other than that, it's a huge risk. So to have a ransomware assessment done to understand, hey, how can we be better, right? And that's one of those documented steps that you're going to have to put in your tickler, right? Well, that's a term, right? But to put in your file phase, so you have. All right, Kristen, I'm done rambling. Go for it.
I really like that. Put in your tickler.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar, I used Wheel of Names, random name selection. And our winners are, for the dark web scan, John Highland. I apologize if I pronounce anyone's name wrong. Another dark web scan will be Charles O'Donnell. Our ransomware assessments will be going to Maria Sullivan and Dave Grace. We'll be following up with you guys this afternoon to get those going. Again, please stay on for just a second after we end this to fill out the survey that you'll have. Just 4 questions. We really appreciate it. And you'll be able to find this webinar recording and others on our website, www.harvardnetworks.com, under the resources tab. Feel free to reach out with any questions about any of them. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Nice long weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.